Hello, world. Welcome to the Speed Strength Show. I'm Braden.
I'm Tommy. And why is powerlifting called powerlifting when it's the weight that matters?
That's a good point. It is, well, it's not aptly named. I don't know what a word that means not aptly is, but it's not. It has a poor name. That's for sure.
It's just misleading
hmm
because there's still power involved.
I mean,
Like if you
inherently,
think about like from a physics standpoint, power is simply the work done over time.
yeah. I mean,
There's still work being done over a period of time, but it's
yeah,
not the emphasis of what's going on.
yeah. If load gets moved, then there is power. But yeah, because it's not a competition of who can produce the most power. It's who can move the most weight, which is force, and like the amount of time it takes doesn't matter at all.
That's what I mean. If I bench press 6,000 pounds and somebody
That's a
else bench
lot.
presses 6,000 pounds, it's sort of exaggerated for what I can actually bench.
A
But
6,000.
yeah. So if I bench 6,000 and another person benches 6,000, they don't break the tie by going who moved the weight the fastest. As long
That's
as
right.
you benched 6,000 pounds within the rules, then I presume, do they use white flags or white lights?
They use white lights. If the lights don't work, they use cards.
Okay. So I'm thinking track and field, but they have the white flags and someone just
Mm.
sits there and throws it up. But
hmm
that's, I mean, it still counts as a legal lift and there's no benefit or detriment to how quickly you move the weight.
No, the only benefit might be that if you move it faster, it's theoretically easier, so you can do more the next time. But if it's
Yeah,
your third attempt, it doesn't matter. 6,000, 6,000.
that's right.
And in that situation, you would win because you are definitely lighter than anyone who's benching 6,000 pounds.
What is it? My Wilk score? Is that what it is?
Yeah, tiebreaker's body weight.
Yeah.
So,
So my score would be through the roof
well, yeah. I mean, first
with
of
a
all, no
6,000
one,
pound bench and like 125 pounds of body weight. Done. I'm
yes,
destroying the field on that.
because nobody even totals 6,000. Nobody totals, like in equipped lifting, people barely total 3,000.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, 6,000 was a bit of a
yes, it was.
exaggerated number.
Yeah.
It was for effect though.
hmm
But yeah, I've always found it interesting. Like when people talk about like weightlifting and powerlifting, I was like, they should almost have the names
They should absolutely
flipped
be backwards. Yeah, 100%.
because the weight in powerlifting is the most important part. The weight is super important in weightlifting as well because it is about totals, but the the necessary component of producing power in weightlifting is way more crucial because that's going to give you higher bar speed, higher velocities, which usually end up giving you bigger lifts because it's about how quickly you can move
hmm
this load and how quickly you can move underneath the load and stabilize yourself.
Yeah, the lifts are certainly more powerful in weightlifting, less powerful in powerlifting. Some are very, very slow.
In
And
powerlifting,
oh yeah,
I mean, yeah, I've seen some clips and it's
like not even just like we talked about sticking points a few times so far on air. Um, but like obviously your sticking point is going to be slow, but some people just their entire like it's like they're doing tempo. Like a maximal attempt is like 5 second count down, 5 second count up, and like the whole it's smooth, it's consistent. It's just so tremendously slow the entire time, which is arguably impressive.
is there a benefit to going slower on the way down? And the only reason I bring that up is because anytime I've done training, like with myself, and I've played around with some of that like slow tempo, eccentric work on like that, some of that crappy hypertrophy stuff I've done where it was like 2 or 3 reps to failure
Mm-hmm.
and the load is extremely heavy, but you have a 4 or 5 count on the way down.
Mm-hmm.
The number of times where you can move the load back up relatively quickly, despite that really slow controlled descent, has caught me off guard a number of times where it's like, man, you think about just going down and going up as being way easier than slowly moving down and then trying to come up. But I've found sort of like in practice that sometimes it actually makes it easier to come up with the weight
Yeah, sometimes. I
afterwards.
mean, like there's with that, there's like the stability, like going slower would mean that you're inherently more stable,
Mhm.
which is obviously a huge benefit. Um, in, but it's also like the fatigue is part of it. If you're talking about one rep, it's not like a big thing, I don't think, unless you're going really slow, then it's not a big thing. Because, if you're talking about like a 2 count eccentric versus a 4 count eccentric, it's not a huge difference. If it's like a 2 versus a 6 count, that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
Then, uh, but as long as you're like, you want to be stable and controlled, but then the other part of it is like, we're talking about the squat mostly, um, is the like stretch reflex, or the elasticity that you get at the bottom, the bounce, you know.
Yeah.
So if you go slow, then you don't have that at all, really. It's mitigated in the bench because you have to pause the bench. But even then, like if you go a little bit slower, you can be a little bit tighter in your pause and you like leak less energy that way.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. And like there's obviously training benefits too, but it's a balance between like you need to be stable, you want to be fast because it is less taxing and you got that extra benefit. But if you hit the hole really hard and collapse and die, then your total's gonna suck. So
Collapse and die.
yeah.
Probably a bit of an exaggeration.
I mean, I've seen some really ugly things happen at the bottom of the squat.
Don't they have spotters to protect you though? I mean, I get there's only so much a spotter can do.
I mean, the spotters have reaction times.
That's fair.
I've seen people's like hips give out, like they hit the hole hard and their hip just like rolls.
Oh, and then it's like boom, the weight's just dropping.
They're just down. Yeah.
A
Or
dangerous sport.
I've seen somebody. This
Called
isn't.
danger lifting.
I mean, all lifting is dangerous. I
I don't
did
know
see
about all
somebody.
lifting.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Maybe not all lifting.
There's some
Um,
there's some tame lifting that goes on.
yeah.
I'm sure in public gyms and other places like that, or
Yeah.
someone learning to lift for the first time is like, I don't want to go too heavy.
Yeah.
Pick up the 8-pound dumbbell.
Hmm.
But yeah,
I did see one time somebody like walking out in competition, walking out a squat. This was a video. I didn't see it live. Um, and they had a particularly wide stance, and they stepped out, and their right ankle rolled as they were stepping out, and so they just fell
with all the
because
weight.
yeah, like they dropped the weight, obviously, but yeah, they just fell because their right ankle rolled as they were stepping out, and yeah, I mean that's it's just scary. It's cringy, man.
Yeah, they should call it danger lifting.
Yeah.
We'll start that right now. I'm going to petition to change powerlifting to danger lifting
Yeah.
because it sounds much more dangerous than running down the track at full speed.
Well, yeah, you can't. I mean, you can't even call that lifting at all because you don't lift anything.
Yeah, no. What I'm saying, like relatively speaking to the like, it carries much more danger than most other sports. So we're gonna call it danger lifting from now on. Although
Yeah, I
you
mean,
could
I guess
probably call weightlifting danger lifting too, because there's
yeah,
some
but
pretty
the loads
gruesome
are
weightlifting injuries.
that's true. The loads are lighter. I don't know. I feel like, well, I don't know. No, if any sport, I would say of all like the weight, like the lifting sports, the strength sports, then you're probably most likely to die in powerlifting, I would say.
Therefore, it's the most dangerous
I would say. I
and
mean,
should
you're
be
not
called danger lifting.
I wouldn't say you're the most likely to get injured, but I mean, maybe, but I would say definitely most likely to die in that sport.
I've never done any of those sports:
Hmm.
strongman, weightlifting, powerlifting.
Hmm. Um,
Where'd that
well,
name even come from? Do you
powerlifting?
know
I
powerlifting?
don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's a bad name.
It's probably the
Maybe I'll
same
look it up.
person who invented the English language.
Nice.
Got all their words mixed up.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, this is powerlifting.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense, but we're going to call it powerlifting. Okay.
Mhm. Try to be powerful. Anyway, so now that we've really sold powerlifting and everybody is looking forward to do it now,
I'm positive that the participation is going to skyrocket.
Yeah. Yeah. As gyms start to close again. But on the topic of injuries, we're talking about injuries again today, which
Correct.
was a better transition than last week. Not great, but better.
Way smoother than last week.
Yeah.
Can't nail them all though.
Well, yeah. It takes a lot of energy to nail them all.
It does.
A lot of mental gymnastics.
Is that a sport?
Mental gymnastics?
Yeah. I know I'm derailing the conversation now, but I just had to ask.
Have we had any sport related like opening tidbit things? Like you mentioned that you had a race car one time.
Yeah, I was about to get really offended there. Like, did we have any sport opening things? I'm like, yeah, I talked about race car driving, the best sport in the world.
Yeah, okay. So besides that one, I don't think we have, because we've had some really interesting conversation about what constitutes a sport.
Off air, yes, we have.
Yeah. Okay. We should get into that one of these days.
We could. Yeah. Anyway, sorry to derail you about talking about injuries.
That's fine. I think this is all adding to how smooth the transition was. So
good point.
Yeah, I mean, last time we talked a lot about like working around the injury, essentially, like just continuing to train, continuing to progress, continuing to work towards your goals, and like be prepared for when the injury is not an issue anymore, so that when you get back into training, maybe you've progressed, or maybe you're at least on less of a deficit than you would have otherwise been. But yeah, we didn't really talk about like training the tissue or training the movement or whatever that was the problem.
Yeah, or even like you said, the focal point of the injury itself. Yeah. Like if it happened to be your elbow or your knee or ankle or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of the things we talked about last week were how do we work around it, and how do we still keep the training qualities that we need, and how do we do things that we need to do in a way that doesn't either use or irritate the structure of the tissue that's been injured. But we can't just ignore that part of the body. You still have to address it in some kind of way when it comes to someone having an injured part of the body.
Yeah, so like I guess that's like part of a strength coach's job is to work around injuries, for sure. Like that's 100%. It
might be the bigger job too. I'd say that's the bigger focus for a strength coach.
Well, especially for you being part of a like an institution where all the teams have access to ATs or PTs or chiros or whatever. How much like rehab stuff do you do, I guess, with track or any of the other athletes that you work with?
It's a bit of a mixed bag here. I think I can speak to it probably way better to when I was at Waterloo and McMaster, because I had a much closer relationship with like anyone who was on the medical side there. One of the difficult things with us here at the U of A is I personally don't really have a whole lot of contact with the ATs and the PTs that we have. And so it's more the event coaches who deal with that. Potentially around what can they do, what can't they do. And that just gets handed down to me for the most part in the weight room. And then on the other side with the high school kids that I work with, both in the weight room and on the track, they're just kids from the community. So I don't necessarily know who their chiro or their physio or anything like that. I try to, when they're at practice, ask them questions, or what did this person tell you you can do, what you can't do, things like that. I do try to get that information out of them, but they're not like varsity athletes at the school where I have direct contact with their medical or physio, or the clinicians, I should say, any of the clinicians that would be working with them directly on an injury. So it's tougher for me to talk about it in this specific environment because I'm kind of a couple steps removed or it's someone that I don't even know who's doing the clinical work in that case. But it was very different at Waterloo and Mac, where I had direct contact with the individuals that were responsible medically for the athletes that I worked with.
Yeah, that definitely makes a big difference, I think. Um, where like right now, where I'm at with my athletes, like they're all individuals, right? So they don't have. I mean, a lot of them are university or like recently graduated, so they did have access to some kind of you know therapy stuff through the school. Um, but yeah, most of the time, I guess not having contact with them. Anyone in this area, I refer to my chiro, and I have a good relationship with him. So when I see him, then we'll chat about whoever I've sent to see him, which is really, really helpful because it informs the training and the rehab. And it's important for both sides to be on the same page about stuff. Um, and yeah, having relationships with like other chiros that I refer people to and having conversations about like tricky situations. But if somebody's seeing a like practitioner that I don't know, um, and that I, based on what they're telling me, that I don't necessarily trust to like, I know every practitioner knows what they're doing, but it comes with experience and it comes with working with a certain population as well. And if you're dealing with lay people mostly, and then this person's an athlete, then the issues that you think you're seeing aren't necessarily the issues, you know? So in a lot of those situations, like I try to do everything that I can do, but a lot of it just ends up being like wait and see. And I don't really have the authority to overrule what the AT or PT or Cairo said. And if they say you need to take 2 weeks off of this lift, I'm like, all right, I guess we have to do that. I don't think it's the right call, but I guess we have to do that, you know? So it definitely helps to have that relationship for sure.
Yeah, that's something I didn't really have to deal with. Like I said, if I go back to the situation at Mac and Waterloo, I had a great relationship with both the people that I worked with there, who where we were responsible for the same athletes, either them more from a medical or athletic therapy side, and then myself in the weight room. We had a very open line of communication, and there was even instances where I would be in the clinic or they would be in the weight room or something like that. And that really brings a ton of benefit to what's going on. Because then if they were working with an athlete who now has an injury and I'm in the clinic, I get to see firsthand what they're telling the athlete, what they're saying. I'm seeing what's happening. And then I know, okay, I'm not trying to get information secondhand from the athlete, from the the person that they're working with, and it's potentially a game of broken telephone. I'm seeing it happen right in front of me, and I'm being told by the clinician or the practitioner themselves, here's what I'm doing, here's what's happening, this is what we're looking for. And so it really creates that open line of communication. And it's the same way when they come into the weight room, they don't have to, ask the athlete, oh, did you avoid this and that? Or were you able to get this and that done? They can see exactly what's happening and hear directly from me. So that was a huge benefit. And I personally feel like I had a lot of success with individuals that I worked with who had injuries at both those schools, and helped a lot of people progress forward and get back to a good spot. And I think a lot of the credit goes to the fact that we had a very open line of communication, and that makes doing the job a lot easier because they have their specialty, they have their expertise. I have my specialty, I have my expertise. And then through that line of communication, you can bridge the gap of, okay, when can they start to do a little less on the therapy or the restricted side and start to open things up a little bit more and have it turn into training. And you can really move through that gray zone with a lot of confidence and a lot of success.
Yeah, that definitely yeah, it's huge. I know like I unfortunately don't have that opportunity a lot of the time right now. um but there are, yeah, like a couple of people that I have a good relationship with, so that I can, um, yeah, like there's a clinic in Hamilton that I've been to a couple of times with, like just to sit in on the treatment of a couple of my athletes. And then like while we're there, I'm talking to the chiro and just what do you see? What's going on? And he's explaining to me in like terms that I understand. And like you'd have to say it differently to people that don't have um, like an anatomical or, kin background or whatever. So it's, yeah, like a little bit more accurate to your point. It's not playing broken telephone. Um, but then you also have that opportunity to like talk through training plans and stuff. Like this is the rehab that you're going to do, of course, but then in terms of training, like, do we think this kind of a strategy would work? Um, like there was one athlete, she had uh, like a pretty, it wasn't like necessarily a bad injury. It just got to the point where it was like debilitating training wise anyway, for her back. And it ended up being nerve disc ish related stuff. Um, and so I was able to, yeah, sit in on one of her treatments and talk through with the chiro, like, where is this happening? What's the nerve? And like he's explaining, so these kinds of functions are not working 100%. So then the rehab stuff's going to take care of that. And basically, the whole thing was like she's strong still. She just can't hold, like, she doesn't have a lot of capacity, is the thing. So we needed to build capacity, but she also had nationals coming up. So we knew that basically you can do some heavy stuff, just be careful when you get into it. And then after the heavy stuff, do like light stuff to build that capacity. So we ended up just doing like 1 or 2 sets of heavy squats and deadlifts. Um, and we set the number at like 3 or 4 reps to start, I think, because the first week she did it, she was fine. Like 1, 2, 3 reps were fine. And then the fourth rep of that set was not fine. Um, so we're like, okay, you can handle 3 reps. That's perfect. And then just gradually increasing the weight. 3 reps was fine. And then back down sets of like 3 to 5, somewhere at like 50%, just way, way less. Um, and she was solid. She was solid. So just getting an idea of like what the body could handle, but that never would have happened without like being able to be in person talking with the clinician who has the skills that I don't have yet. Anyway. So
Yeah, and like you said, it's a chance to kind of work through with them. I used like one of the things I used to always do when I was going into the clinic, to see anyone who was working with the athletes, was I was always going in with the notepad and pen and paper, and then get in there. Okay, update me on this person, that person, that person. Okay, here's where they're at. And then when I knew that's what I was dealing with, then we could talk through the goals of, okay, so this is where the person's at, but this is what we need to be doing. Like we still need to find a way to keep them to, get whatever type of conditioning work, or we still need to keep them strong or powerful or whatever trait that was important. So then for me, it gave me very clear guidelines as a strength coach in terms of I can do this, I can't do that. This is what I need to get done within these constraints. And obviously the constraints were completely different based on the injury and the person, and it was unique for each person. So that basically gave me the pieces to the puzzle that I needed, and then I could just work on it and put together the puzzle myself. And then with those guidelines, then I could write something and then come back and have a conversation with whoever the clinician or the practitioner was and say, okay, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Do any of these things jump out at you as a red flag potentially based on the injury or the issue that they're dealing with? And if so, let me run by a few ideas with you on different positions or postures or ways that we could do potentially the same exercise that wouldn't irritate the damaged area. So that was a really helpful process because I was basically working one-on-one with these athletic therapists or clinicians or whoever to build something that we were both sitting there going, yeah, are you comfortable implementing that? Yeah. Are you comfortable that this isn't going to do any harm to the athlete? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So we have a plan now. And then when they go back to see the clinician the next week or 2 weeks from then, and they get an update, here's how we've progressed, we can start to remove some of the restrictions and continue to progress forward. But basically something was never being done without the other person who was working with that athlete knowing what was going on. And you probably remember some of the people that were injured, the athletes at Waterloo, and a lot of them made very rapid recoveries or made good recoveries and were able to come back at a high level. And a lot of the same things happened to Mac. And I personally attested to the fact that the ATs that I had to work with were excellent in having an open line of communication and involving me in what they were doing, and then in turn wanting to be involved in what I was doing. And it really makes a huge difference in that point, because that gray area between when someone's completely in the world of a clinician and is dealing with a major injury, and then when someone's completely in the world of strength conditioning or training, injury free, anything that's in between is really a gray zone on when is it the strength coach's job, when is it the clinician's job, and where does that line actually sit. It's very difficult to figure out where it is. And so unless the two people are on the same page communicating, that's where you can get the issues arising for the athlete, is potentially doing something harmful in that gray zone.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really, really good point, because I would say, like, very, very rarely is the athlete 100% like in the clinician's room, like on the table, I think, like we talked about last week, regardless of the injury, there's almost certainly something that you can do, or a lot of things that you can do. And that was another really good point as well, where you've got, like, these are the things they're capable of, these are the things they're not capable of right now. Obviously, we're working on that. And then this is what I need to get done. So you've got the pieces to the puzzle. How can we put it together? And I think that's a really important way to think about it, because, and to kind of get into what we talked about last week a little bit, if you have a clear idea of what they need to be able to do, you don't necessarily need them to be 100% healthy to get there. Like we talked last week about a lot of ways to work around an injury, a lot of ways to accomplish a lot of things that you might get from one exercise or whatever that you need to be doing, but they can't do that right now. So how can we accomplish that same goal? Like if you're training for sport and you need hip extension, you do deadlifts a lot. Deadlifts hurt. You don't need to do deadlifts because it's just for sport. That's fine. We can do hip thrusters. We can do, whatever other stuff.
You can find another way to get hip extension in the program and in your training, so that way that movement, for example, is not neglected.
Exactly.
As a result of the injury.
Exactly. With powerlifting, you don't necessarily have that option. You need to be able to deadlift. You need to be able to bench and squat. But what are they capable of? What are they not capable of? Maybe the injury is something that gets worse with heavy weight. So you can do maybe a lot more work with lighter weights and be 100% fine and still keep progressing. Maybe it's something that it's reps that bothers it. So maybe you can go really heavy. You just don't do a lot of reps. I know I was in that boat. I don't remember if we got into our injury experience too in depth last time, but
we touched on it a little bit.
When
I don't know how many specific examples or stories we necessarily went into. That was last week. It was a long time ago. I can't remember that far back.
Yeah, that's right. But when I was competing more, when competitions were a thing, and I was competing more seriously, and did my centrals, provincials, nationals run in like 8-ish months of like really solid, consistent training, I would not say I was healthy. Uh, I wouldn't say I was healthy. I wouldn't say I was injury free, but I was able to train consistently because I knew what my body was capable of. Um, and I couldn't handle a lot of reps, but I could go heavy. And so I was doing like maybe 3 sets of squats a week over 2 sessions, like 2 to 4 squat working sets a week over 2 sessions. And
Do
like,
less really well.
exactly. And like maybe 1 to 3 sets of deadlifts over 1 session. Bench was more because I could handle more for bench, but that's all I could do. And it was heavy, but my squat numbers went up quite a bit. And that's the thing is like, I don't need to be able to do a lot of reps. I just need my squat to go up and my bench to go up and my deadlift to go up. It doesn't really matter how it goes, like how I get there, as long as I get there.
As long as you increase your power, then you're going to be the best power lifter.
That's right. So I think it's important to like keep that sort of a thing in mind, where like what is the real goal? Because like, yes, you want them to be 100% healthy. That's the goal, but that's not, as a strength coach, that's not necessarily your job. The strength coach's job, I think, is to continue to work towards the goals with the constraints that you have and not limit their amount of like don't get in the way of their healing, but you don't need to wait until they're 100% healthy to start pushing, as long as you have a way to push. So,
Well, and there's always so many things that you may need to accomplish as a strength coach that are general in nature, right? In terms of that quality is a means to an end. So somebody could hurt their knee, and the goal might have been to develop hypertrophy. Just because someone has a knee injury doesn't mean we still can't find a way to work the muscles in and around the knee and provide them a stimulus that will make them grow larger and produce more muscle or produce more maximal strength or target, like we talked about before with hip extension, targeting a certain movement. So I think a good strength coach is always trying to be creative and finding a way to, like you said, what's the goal that we need to accomplish? And yeah, okay, we have this injury. Doesn't mean we ignore it. It's important that we address that, and they need to go see whoever to take care of that. And we want to provide them whatever we can based on the recommendations of those workers or clinicians that are working with the athlete to help them address that. But like you said, it doesn't mean we go, okay, well, now we can't train anymore. We never completely toss that out. We're always trying to find a way. What can we do to continue moving forward? And yeah, like I said, I think with strength coaches, it's not our role necessarily to be on the medical side. That's not our realm. That's not our scope. That's not what we're trained to do. But with that open line of communication, we can, like you said, figure out how to go after some of those goals or adaptations or whatever it is that we're looking for while still being potentially injured. Like I said, doesn't mean we ignore the injury because we want to get that person healthy, but we don't ignore all aspects of training simply to address the area of the injury.
mm-hmm.
We have to have a bigger approach than that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In some cases, though, well, you mentioned with the high school students, like they're just somebody from the community, right? So they don't like university students, especially varsity students. They have like access to the ATs and the PTs and whatever. So like they have somebody. They're going to see this person because it's it's right there. It's provided. But they don't have somebody. They have you essentially. And you talk about sometimes like someone shows up and they're feeling a kind of way and you ask them some questions like, are you with the high school students or with anybody else that you train outside of the university setting where you can refer to that, to the therapy side? Are you helping them with injuries, or like do they come to you with injuries or anything like that ever?
I mean, yeah, some of the kids in our dev program, I mean, a lot of them all the time will come with something. Like they show up and as they're warming, oh, my knee is this, or my ankle is that, or my back, whatever the area the injury happens to be. And I don't have expertise in that realm. I am not. I understand to some extent how the body functions and how it works, and how some of the repair processes or injury process, works over the course of whatever timeline. But I'm not an AT. I'm not a chiro. I'm not a sports doc, a physio, anything like that. So I tend to be very hands off in that type of regard because that's not my domain and that's not my expertise. But I think there's always things that I can do in terms of someone shows up to a session and they have an injury, and my golden rule is to do no harm. So if I can get them to do something and there's no pain, if I can get them to do something that even for that first day, let's say, oh, my knee is bugging me. Have you gone to see anybody about it? No, it's recent. Okay, then let's address something. Let's do something today for training that doesn't even use that part of the body. And you can go see somebody and then we can start to work around it. Because I think in that type of a scenario, I just don't want to take any chances and overstep my boundaries in terms of trying to become something I'm not, whether it's an AT or a physio or something like that, and go, well, okay, let's take a look at it. Let's do this, let's do that. And that's not my area. That's not my scope. And so for me to start, oh, let's try to manipulate this, or let's try this technique or that thing, like it's not my profession. It's not what I do. So in the immediate, I'll probably play it safer and just, okay, let's avoid that for today. Let's find an alternative training means. And then if they've gone to see somebody and I know they're getting treatment on the area, then we can start to be a little bit more, okay, let's see if we can target that area, but in a way that doesn't bring any pain or discomfort to that joint or tissue or structure that's giving them problems.
Yeah, I 100%. Yeah, that's definitely a good way to approach it for sure. I do like I don't do any hands-on stuff. Like I'm not trained in that, of course.
Well, and that's dangerous. As soon as you start putting your hands on
Yeah,
to massage or
like
manipulate, oh,
yeah.
I can pop your ankle back into place, no problem.
Oh
Oh,
no,
like you're
never
in a
doing that.
really bad spot if you're doing
No,
that.
definitely not going to pretend that I know how to do chiropractic adjustments
No,
or anything. Never,
that's what
never,
I mean.
never. But like, I don't know, some stuff. I guess the one situation is like a psoas release, where I've had that done enough times to myself, and um, so I can like help people a little bit, um, with their permission, of course. Um, Figure out, because I mean it's a hard thing to find, honestly, to help them figure that out. But most of the time, if any of my athletes are presenting with pain, like if it's like a really minor thing and it just shows up this one time and then goes away, no big deal, that's fine.
Yeah.
If it's like a recurring thing, it depends on, like I've dealt with a lot of different things, and I've seen various people for a lot of different things, um, and talked to my chiro about a lot of different things as well. So a lot of the time I have an idea at least. And like, I'm sure you kind of see like common things in track. Like I imagine a hamstring strain is a relatively common thing as far as track injuries go. That's something that you'll see more often. We'll see like pec tendon strains or like bicep tendon impingement, hip impingement, SI joint sprain, or however you want to call it. Knee things are kind of different because there's a lot of stuff that can be going on in your knee. But like those are the common ones that it's not, I guess they're not necessarily injuries. SI joint can get to a point where it is definitely, you would call it an injury. But they're just sort of, I'm experiencing pain. I can still do the movement fine. I've not lost any strength, but I'm experiencing pain. and it's affecting training, and it's affecting how much I'm enjoying training, and definitely potentially could get dangerous at a point. Um,
That's like painful function,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah, that's a good way to think about it. So, ask some questions like, what does it feel like? How would you describe the pain? The first time you ask somebody that, they're horrible at it. Um, like they just say it hurts. I don't know. It hurts a lot and it's here. And it's like, well, I knew that it hurt and I knew where it was. Tell me, like, is it burning? Is it sharp? Things like that. Like, describe it.
Yeah. Is it dull?
That get
If I do this with my arm, does it hurt more? If I do that with my arm, does it hurt less? Like,
Yeah,
you try to help them along to some
yeah.
extent.
Well, exactly. So that gives you some clues, um, like impingement, like a pinching pain feels sharp. So
Yeah.
that gives you a clue of like what it is, and knowing where it is, like, okay, it's a pinching pain. It's the front of the shoulder. If I'm watching your bench press, I see your shoulders kind of shrug up when you're at the bottom. You feel it most at the bottom. Okay. Probably it's some kind of a shoulder impingement. I know that if I help you strengthen and learn how to depress your shoulders better and strengthen that like low trap, activate that low trap, and give you some cues to work on that tightness in the bottom of your bench press, you're not going to do that as much. You're going to create more room for that bicep tendon to move. Then that's probably going to alleviate that issue. Now, if you do the drills, you get better at the drills, you get better at the cues, and your bench press looks great. You're still feeling that pinching, then I don't know what to do anymore, But like a lot of times that works. So I'll give them the drills, or same kind of idea with the hip. Maybe it's like a stance change, turning your toes out a little bit, oftentimes will help eliminate that pinch. Working on the bracing, I think I've talked about that before, where you are in a more neutral position, less extension, you create more room in the hip. Pinching pain goes away. That's perfect. If it doesn't, then yeah, I have no idea what the issue is. So now at that point, you got to go see somebody. Um, and over time, like through my own experiences and talking with people, and then obviously dealing with athletes as well, you kind of learn these are the common issues. These are things that typically work, or at least help. Like, it's not necessarily always going to solve the issue, but we can train more consistently than we were before. Uh, you're experiencing less pain than you were before. It's not fixing it, but it's better. These are things that work, and you kind of start to see those patterns. And I imagine it's the same thing in every other, maybe not every other sport, but like strength sports. I imagine weightlifting has consistent things that show up. I imagine strongman has maybe less consistent because it's a more variable sport. I imagine sprinting has consistent things that show up, or like swimming, things that are repetitive like that have consistent things that show up. But yeah, that's about the extent of it for me.
You probably have a bit of a different approach than me, though, because you are a little more in tune with the world of the clinician, right? Like, obviously you are not a certified clinician, but you have some aspirations to do chiropractic work, and you spend some time with chiropractors and things like that. Because really the only thing that I can bring to the table is anything I've learned from a, recovery or rehab standpoint has come from the conversations that I've had with the ATs that I've worked directly with. And so I can sometimes have, from past experience, an idea of, oh, this person's coming to me today with knee pain. And then in the memory bank, you can go back to what are some things I've done in the past to work around people with knee pain. And so that's something where, oh, I remember having that discussion with so and so, that being in this position versus that position, loads the knee differently in a leg curl with a stability ball or a TRX or something like that. So I can kind of work off of past experience and advice that's been given to me from an AT or a clinician within the realm of what I'm allowed to do. Right. So I maybe don't need to ask that person in depth about what their physio or somebody has provided to them, or they may not even know because maybe they haven't gotten to see somebody. But then I can be a little bit more confident with, oh, okay, I'm giving them these couple of exercises to do, and I don't think it's going to damage the joint or the tissue that's irritated because I've had these conversations with these people in the past around, oh, typically with the knee, this, or typically with an ankle, you want to watch out for that. So it's been for me a bit of a learned experience where the more conversations I've had with some of these clinicians and the more work I've done with athletes working around injuries, then the more confident I've become in dealing with an athlete who shows up with a surprise out of nowhere, who's not a varsity athlete, doesn't have access to a medical staff that I would have contact with potentially directly, and be a little bit more confident to, okay, here's what we can do for today. Let me know if you end up with any pain. Because if you start to get pain, then we have to pull back. But yeah, I don't know if it's a little bit different for you because, like I said, you're a little more in tune with that world than I am in that sense. So I could see you having a little bit more of an aggressive, is probably not the right word, like, but a different approach because you're probably armed with a little bit more in the toolbox than I am in that realm.
Yeah, I mean, like it is still pretty much like I definitely wouldn't say that I'm trained in that. It just maybe like it's still learned experiences through like me being treated myself for various issues by a variety of people. Um, and with each issue that I've had, you know, you remember what it feels like, you remember where you feel it and like what it's limiting. Um, and then eventually that issue is solved and you figure like you remember the thing that worked, you know, like for me, that's the, the things, I guess, like the favorite exercises or the favorite drills, like, and it's drills that I'll give people to practice a specific skill or like, uh, yeah, basically practicing a specific skill. The favorites are the ones that have helped me or have helped other people that I've worked with, you know. Um, like there's one, um, like when people have an SI joint issue, for example, um, I will for sure give them like a specific kind of a curl up. It's not a McGill curl up. It's a little bit different than that, working specifically on pulling the ribs down to keep the spine, to practice the skill of keeping the spine in a more neutral position
Mhm.
when you're squatting, to limit that excessive extension, which typically is more aggravating for an SI joint issue, um, because that helped me a lot. And then the other one is a like an SI stability closing drill kind of thing, because as we've learned, like an SI joint that moves a lot is one that's painful. An SI joint that's closed and stable is one that's not painful. So this drill just kind of activates the adductors and the glutes to close the SI joint and keep it stable. And that's one that one of my athletes got from this clinic in Hamilton, and it worked for them. And then I was like, okay, yeah, what is that drill? How do I do it? I tried it. I've used it. It's helped me with my SI joint issues in the past. And then, okay, perfect. If it seems like another athlete's having SI joint related issues, do your curl ups because that'll keep you in a better position when you're squatting and it won't hurt as much that way. And do this SI drill because that's your rehab essentially. You've got the curl up as your protection, and then this closing drill is your fixing the issue, you know. Um, but it ends up being that, like, it's just a lot of learned experiences. Obviously, when I go to school, I'll have a better idea about the concepts, and I've had a few conversations about the overarching concepts as to like what's informing like a clinician's decision making process, and why are we doing this and this, and why are you prescribing that drill, and like these different things. So I've been able to go through that process a little bit, with a few like smaller issues, and have had success. But yeah, most of the time it is just like, it seems like this is the issue. We'll try the things that have worked for that issue before. If it works, that's awesome. If it doesn't work, then you got to go see somebody because I'm not sure what's going on. Um, yeah, and then the more you refer people and hear back, and the more you have experiences yourself, then you get like a bigger toolbox, a wider variety of experiences. Um, Yeah, like if it's like I feel pretty confident in like knowing when maybe it's not the whole issue, but like an SI joint is painful because I see that a lot. If it's a knee thing, I know a few mechanisms that can cause pain in the knee, and I know at least one or two solutions to those issues, but there are many other things that I don't know if it's those things that would be because they present similarly to small joint. Um, so yeah, with that, it's more of a guessing game. Like it's not going to hurt you to try these couple different things, but one of them might help. And if it does, that's great. And if not, then yeah, you got to see somebody.
Yeah, maybe that's where we differ a little bit is when you describe some of those like rehab things, like try this SI closing drill or something like that. Those are the things that I don't necessarily have in my toolbox.
Mhm.
Where if someone goes, oh, I have a particular joint or structure in the body that's not feeling good, then I think back to, like I said, what have I programmed in the past based on conversations I've had with ATs or physios who are dealing with that same area of the injury. So, okay, I should probably avoid some of these things. And then we can maybe safely try some of these exercises for training. As where what you're talking a little bit about with some of the rehab stuff is things that would be targeted directly to the injury in that regard. And like I said, I don't have an expansive, array of tools available to me in terms of, oh, your knee's hurting, try these couple of drills. Oh, your hip is hurting, try these couple of drills. Like you said, where you can safely just try these exercises and see what they do. I'm not really as well equipped in that area, I think,
Mhm.
as you are. So that's
And
probably more what I meant
yeah,
with
yeah,
that before.
yeah, that makes sense. And then like, and that's, I mean, and that's fine. I think like in all of these things, you just got to know like your limits essentially.
Yeah, do no harm.
Well,
Don't set them
exactly.
backwards.
Exactly. And with all of these things, it's like, yeah, I mean, try it. It's not going to hurt you to try it. And if it helps, that's awesome. If it doesn't, then I mean, that's too bad, but you're no worse off. Um, and yeah, and like you're doing the same thing, you just have a different toolbox than I have, you know. Um, but yeah, as long as you're like staying within your knowledge base, and like clinicians have a scope or you know, like a chiropractor, one chiropractor can help somebody and the other chiropractor might not be able to because they just have different sets of experiences and a different approach. And, like there's no shame in that. You just gotta, it doesn't benefit anybody for you to continue to try to solve the problem when you don't have the tools to do it. You know,
Exactly.
you can't, you're just wasting both of your, like both people's times at that point. So,
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes this is with anything, like the ego can sometimes get in the way. And it's like,
mhm.
and like I said, for me, I have no issue. Like if an athlete comes to me and is like, hey, I'm injured, blah, blah, blah. Like it's not my area of expertise. I can't necessarily
Mhm.
like, oh, do you have anything to like fix my knee? No, that's not within my scope. And I have no shame in saying to somebody that that doesn't fall within my scope. And, you know, that's not necessarily something I can do. This is the type of person that you would need to go see. But yeah, to me, the big things, at least for me, is that when we're dealing with the direct area of the injury is making sure that I'm not doing like any harm to that area and setting them back
Mhm.
even further. Again, trying to like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I can figure this out. I know what to do. And then we set them down a bad path. And again, I think that communication is huge because that's not a skill set that I have. That's not my scope, but it doesn't mean I can't have an open line of communication with someone who is an
Mhm.
expert or does have a practice that falls within that scope. And I can certainly work with that person and they can work with me in order to give the athlete the best service that they can get, both from helping them fix or solve whatever problem they're having with the injury, and then also still being able to get effective training done in the same time. So at
Mhm.
least for me, those are the two big points of emphasis, I think, when it comes to working directly in the spot or working specifically in relation to that injury.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any like in your conversations with different clinicians and like rehab specialists, have you, I guess it depends. I mean, it always depends on the kind of injury and like the individual and stuff, but like what sort of approach, I guess, is that when it's been working well, what kind of approach has it been like with the two of you working together to like begin loading like an injured joint or movement pattern or tissue? Um, I mean, that's probably a really vague question. When you're like, so for me, pec tendons, one that happens a lot where you just you take a little bit of time off, whatever you think might have contributed to the injury, um, work on that stuff, obviously. And then as you're reintroducing it, starting with lightweight first, of course, um, moderate reps to start, ramping up the reps a little bit more because tendons can take more reps better than they can take more weight typically. Um, Tempo work is usually easier. You get more of a stimulus with less weight, so that's also a benefit. And based on a little bit of research that I've read, isometric stuff can help tendons feel less painful. So incorporating that stuff as well. Yeah, with along, I guess, that kind of idea, like when you're starting to reintroduce load to an injured tissue or movement pattern or joint or whatever, what kind of things have you had to keep in mind through your conversations and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Exactly what you've talked about is something that comes up. So sort of that gradual loading on the tissue. So moving from some period of rest, and then can we start to restore range and normal function in that area or that joint, and then we can start to progressively load it. So I would say that's very similar. The other thing I've seen done with some people is in a very similar way with that loading done in conjunction with not only thinking about the external load on the joint, but in what way do we progress the position of the person to change the internal load on the joint, right? So, for example, something like standing up is going to be more taxing than lying down on the ground. So, as we're reintroducing the range and the movement and load, we may also then change the posture, the position that the person is in. So, I've seen some clinicians who work a little bit on that end as well. So, not necessarily different, but just maybe another layer added to what you've talked about. But yeah, I mean, it's the general concept of bringing range and function back. And then once range and function is there, we can start to explore additional load, additional speed, more challenging positions, um, and things like that. Because perhaps maybe we can put them in a challenging position and then just challenge their function, but we might be able to load a little bit more in an easier position. So then you can still sort of attack both ends of the spectrum there. So that, like I said, I've heard a lot of what you just mentioned. And so the only thing I can think of that, like I said, adds another layered dimension onto it is sort of that postural position and how it sort of internally loads whatever structure. But yeah, I would generally agree with exactly what you talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something as well that I've have like through working with clinicians, that's been something that has been recommended and I've used with people before. Like the SI joint issue with deadlifting is the one that comes to mind. Where we'll do curl ups because that helps. We'll do the SI closing because that helps. And then in terms of your actual deadlift training, we'll raise you up and go with like maybe a 4-inch block, and then that's pain free. Okay, cool. We can push the weight on that. And then the next week, as things feel a little bit better, we'll 3-inch block. And then the next week it's a 2-inch block. And then the next week it's a 1-inch block. And you just sort of gradually increase it to that more extreme position. Yeah. And in terms of concepts, like that's exactly what you said is like the first thing is range, and then it's function, and then you can start to load it, and then you can start to progress your intensity and stuff. So yeah, through the conversations that I've had with clinicians, that's the approach that most people I think take, and is um, a safe way anyway.
Yeah, I think the variations I've seen is not necessarily changing that model, but how aggressive their strategy is within that model.
Hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
a more conservative person might say, oh no, the range and function, you got to have that for 2 or 3 weeks. Someone else might say, yeah, after a week, then you're good to go. We can start moving to the
Hmm.
next stage. So it at least from the conversations I've had with people, which again, you've probably had more conversations with clinicians than I have. It seems like those stages seem to be relatively agreed upon, and the strategies that they implement differ sometimes in terms of the time frames.
Hmm.
But that
Yeah.
would be the only thing. But yeah, in general, I think that's mostly how people are getting it done,
Hmm.
at least
Yeah.
from what I've encountered.
Yeah. No, I agree with that for sure. And I think with all that, I mean, every injury is individual. I've said that probably 100 times by now.
Yeah.
Um, but and every clinician is individual as well. So you got to do, and it depends obviously on the person and what they need to be doing and stuff. And with a lay person, you're probably gonna be a little bit more on the safer side, where you can say, yeah, just don't do that for 2 weeks because they don't need to. But with an athlete, you have to understand that if you tell them not to do it for a week, they're probably going to do it 2 days from now. So
We're idiots.
yeah, but yeah. Um, and likewise, I would say music selection is very individual. Some people are going to be a little bit more aggressive or intense with their music selection. Some people are going to be a little bit more reserved or laid back with their music selection.
It always depends, right?
Always depends
Always
on the
depends.
person, on the situation. Yeah, no way around that.
No, for sure.
So,
It's always very individual, like you said.
mhm. So what were you selecting this week? Was it You're typically a little bit more aggressive and intense with the music selection, I would say.
Yeah, even regardless of the genre,
Hmm.
even if it's something like electronic or EDM, the beats per minute's usually up there.
Hmm.
Um, I went back into some older stuff. I had a lot of Pantera playing this week.
Oh, nice.
Classic,
Hmm.
classic metal band. So
Very
they're
cool.
they're unreal. Like I don't know how else to, like they're just talented. That's just a
Hmm.
good band.
Hmm.
Like
I
they
haven't heard.
go ahead. No, no, no. What were you gonna say?
I haven't heard a lot of Pantera, but I've heard a lot of people say that they like Pantera or have been listening to Pantera in the past. So
I could see
it seems
Pantera
like a
being
popular
big in
band.
the world of danger lifting,
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah,
but
it
they,
seems to
they
be.
they even have stuff that's a little more like you've probably heard some songs by them. Maybe you don't know
Yeah,
it's
I
them,
think so.
but I
Yeah.
guarantee that you've heard something by them. But yeah, they're awesome. They're just heavy.
Hmm.
It's good. Yeah,
Nice.
I don't know what else to say. Like I don't have a bad thing to say. So
Yeah.
that's what I had,
Right.
or primarily what I had. Like I said, I obviously listened to. I don't know if I made this clear, but I obviously listened to more than just. It's not like I literally had Pantera playing every single song that I listened to since we last spoke. But that's like
Hmm.
I get caught up in some. What's the word I'm looking for? Uh, like I'll get caught up in certain bands over like a short period of time.
Hmm.
But it's obviously not the only thing that I was listening to. But
Well, that's actually, I don't know. That's a good distinction because I don't know that. Like I know how my music listening goes, but I don't know how I assume that like some people, I feel like some people are song people and some people are like album people and some people are band people, you
yeah,
know? Um, but so if you are listening to, like, if I'm not listening to a band or a playlist or whatever, then I'm listening to like whatever. And it's like, it could be one song from 30 different artists. It doesn't matter. But if I'm listening to a band, then I'll listen to like all of their stuff and there's nothing else unless something else sneaks into the YouTube playlist.
Yeah, like
Um,
I'm a little bit more maybe like the album person where I might have random stuff playing and then like I heard a Pantera song. I'm like, man, they're so good. And then I'm like, I'm going to
mhm,
put on a Pantera album and then I listen to
mhm,
it. And so that's more where like when I share my, what are you listening to this week? If it's like one band, that's
mhm,
normally the way that I'm listening to it. It's not like for the last 7 days, I had the same song by the same band just playing
right.
on an endless loop, or I was only playing their albums for an entire week. It's just there was an emphasis or a bit of a focal point on
Mhm.
that band, and that's where I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I'll share that I was listening to
Nice.
this week because it's obviously sprinkled in with other stuff, but I wasn't sure if that was actually clear.
Well, I think that's helpful for the audience to know now.
Finally, after
Uh,
like what 1,000 episodes, I'm like, oh, that's what he means. Okay,
that's right. That's right. Well, it's good that you're getting it out early because now you'll only be surprising roughly 13 people.
that's right.
Maybe I shouldn't be saying how big our audience base is.
Well, I don't know.
What I meant to say is 13,000.
It's
So,
varied. There's
yeah,
enough. If you go back and look at the stats, it's all over the place, and I'm not
it's
good enough at
variable.
reading those metrics to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, but we are transcontinental, so we have that going for us anyway.
Oh wow,
Yeah, I don't know. We can try to sound as important as the metrics will allow us to.
it's not a
Um,
lie.
it's not a lie.
That's you were honest.
Um, I have been in like kind of a focal music point this week, which has been cool because I always feel like a little bit weird if I'm coming on and I'm saying like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's just harder. I think maybe I mentioned that last time. But I've been
That's your
listening
style,
to,
though. That's your
yeah,
style of listening to music. So
yeah,
that's who you
that's
are.
true.
You shouldn't change it just because you're
Yeah,
putting it
I
out there
mean,
for other people to listen to.
yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna listen to one band that I hate because it'll be easier to say that I was listening to only one band.
You could
um,
listen to one band that you like,
yeah,
and then
well,
just
that's fair. I've been listening to a lot of K-pop this week.
oh,
Um,
let's go.
Korean pop for people that don't know. Yeah, so that's BTS and that's Blackpink, and they're great. It's all great. I don't need to know the lyrics. It's fine.
I
It
don't even know
just,
what the lyrics mean.
of course not. I have no idea. It's fine. The songs sound great, upbeat, up tempo, sounds nice. People got nice voices. People look nice in their music videos. The music videos are, I mean, they might as well be art productions in themselves. They're stunning. So yeah, been very into that lately. So doing work in the gym, it's been nice.
It's not bad.
Yeah,
That's a different route.
yeah, man. Yeah.
Got to be open
So
to all kinds of different music and different
mhm.
interests, so that it's making you well rounded.
Yeah,
Maybe not
cultured.
specifically listening to K-pop, but the general.
I don't know, man. Like it's international music. It's foreign music. I'm
It's cultured.
appreciating the culture of other countries.
That's fair.
So it's really interesting if you like actually learn about K-pop. It's really interesting. I don't know a lot, but it's really interesting.
When you know more, you'll have to share it with me.
Well, I do know that like people try out for these groups. It's not like bands here form organically like we're friends, we like music, let's play together. This is like
It's a production.
uh a like yeah, like a company is forming a group and you try out for that group.
Oh,
And
interesting.
there's roles that people are looking for. Like there's the one that's good at dancing. They're all great at dancing, but this one's the best one at dancing. There's the rapper, there's the one who sings in English. There's like the maybe like the main singer. There's the youngest one is one. I think the prettiest one is one. It's interesting. So
Huh. It's like a job interview.
in a way,
It's a
in a
role and
way,
someone's got to fill it.
yeah. So yeah, but yeah, that was that this week, and that was the episode. So if anybody in the audience wants to tell us something, Instagram, Speed Strength Show, Speed Strength Performance for Thomas,
Correct.
Braden Southern for myself, uh, YouTube comments.
wherever. We'll find it.
Those are the ones. Yeah. Yeah. Anything that we got wrong, anything that you think we need to know or that we should talk about, or music suggestions, or I don't know, if you just want to shout out, just we can do that. That's fine. So yeah, good stuff. That was the Speed Strength Show. I'm Braden.
I'm Tommy, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.